Hey, yeah, we're in a little town called Woodstock, Maine this week. Right. No, I'll do that for sure when I get home. Okay, great. Yep, I'll see you tomorrow. Love you too. Bye.
So, wrong number, Ray?
Yeah, right. Just checking in with the wife.
Cell phones, they're so convenient, right? I mean, aren't they?
I don't think I can remember life before them, Jeff. It's my camera, my email, my social media, the weather forecast, my podcaster player, and it even makes phone calls.
It even makes phone calls, I know. Our phones are everything. So anyway, we're in the small town of Woodstock, Maine, searching for a telephone today.
And I'd say we just found one. Pretty much impossible to miss.
No, you're right. That would be the world's largest telephone, located right here off of Route 26 in Woodstock.
So this roadside oddity is about 14 feet tall. It's black. It's one of those old-fashioned phones with the trumpet-like mouthpiece, and the listening speaker hangs off to the left. There's a handle for turning in front of the base.
This monument is why we're here. Not just to see this colossal phone, but to come to ground zero for America's, not just New England, but America's very last crank call. Hi, I'm Jeff Belanger, and welcome to episode 318 of the New England Legends podcast.
And I'm Ray Auger. Thank you for joining us on our mission to chronicle every legend in New England one story at a time. We're always on the hunt for ghosts, monsters, UFOs, roadside oddities, true crime, and odd history. Most of our story leads come from you. So please subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcast because it's free and we don't want you to miss a thing. And reach out to us anytime through our website.
So we'll get back to America's biggest phone right after this word from our sponsor.
Okay, the town of Woodstock, Maine is the site of America's last crank phone call.
Yep, that it is.
Well, I made some crank calls in my time, Jeff. Is your refrigerator running?
you
better go catch it. And that 1981 hit song by Tommy Two-Tone, 867-5309.
Right.
Funny thing is, I grew up in East Brookfield, Massachusetts. 867 was our exchange.
Oh, man. So some poor soul in your town must have had that number and wondered why so many wrong numbers were asking for Jenny.
Crank calls were such a big part of growing up in the 80s, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I was making those calls too.
But I get it. Every phone today has caller ID. Most people don't even make calls anymore. They just text.
Sure.
Plus, scams seem to have replaced the harmless crank call. So I get that it had to die out sometime. I'm curious, though, how do you know that the last one happened here?
Right, that. So we're not in Woodstock because of prank phone calls. We're here because this is where the last crank call was made. See that handle in front of the giant phone?
Yeah.
So that's actually a crank. You'd turn it to ring the operator and patch your call through.
Okay, I get it now. The old crank phones died out here in Woodstock?
They did, and much later than you ever would have guessed.
All right, I'm looking up some facts about the phone. On my phone.
Right, convenient.
Alexander Graham Bell made the first telephone call on March 10th, 1876.
Right, so the technology's been around a long time.
Now, the magic of the telephone is that it turns your voice into an electronic signal that travels over a wire and then gets converted back into sound.
Amazing, right? So the technology built off the telegraph. That sent an electric signal across a wire where it was converted into dots and dashes. So the wires were already there. Bell just took it to the next level.
The first people to adopt the telephone were businesses who could afford the new technology. But soon, private residences in urban areas started getting telephones, and then it spread from there.
The earliest phones were these crank-type boxes. You turn the crank, which spins a magneto and sends an electric current to ring the bells on the other phones in the same line. Now, in coming years, that current alerted an operator at a switchboard who would then patch your call through. Every phone in the line had its own pattern of rings, so you knew if the incoming call was for you or not.
So basically the old party phone lines.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm sure there were tons of eavesdropping. I mean, if you pick up, you can hear what's being said. Switchboards allowed party lines to connect to different party lines, and from there, networks grew. Plus, chances are you personally knew your local switchboard operator. I mean, you could ask, what's the correct time? What's the weather forecast? When does a local store close for the day?
Almost like my iPhone.
Right.
By 1920, there were over 170,000 telephone operators working in the United States. In 1919, rotary dialing had just been introduced, but it really took off in the 1940s and 1950s. In 1962, the first touch-tone phones were introduced, and that took off in the 1970s.
And now landlines are becoming a thing of the past, too. Many folks have dropped them because the cell phone is all that most people need.
Technology is always progressing. That's for certain.
Okay, so back to the last crank call here in Woodstock, Maine.
That's right. That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. So like I said, it happened later than you'd ever guess.
Okay, so if rotary dials started to replace crank phones in the 1940s, I'll say the last ones hung in there until 1960s?
No, it was later than that. And people around here didn't part easily with their old-fashioned phones. So let's head back to 1981 and witness the last crank call.
It's August of 1981. Jimmy Carter is president of the United States, and recording artist Tommy Two-Tone is in the studio right now recording his future hit song, Jenny Jenny, 8675309. But folks here in Woodstock, Maine are mad.
They are mad. Sure, they know the rest of the country has moved on to rotary and touch-tone phones. They know they're the last, but now it feels like a badge of honor. It's historic. It's unique. They don't want to change.
Operator, how can I direct your call?
But business is business. The first phone system in town was installed in 1938 when Woodstock only had 15 telephones. The Bryant Pond Telephone Company, owned by Barbara and Eldon Hathaway, bought the system in 1951 and operated the business out of their home. Today, there are 431 customers on the old Magneto system, but big changes are coming. The Oxford Telephone Company is looking to buy the Bryant Pond Company and update the whole system to new lines.
Some Woodstock locals named Dave Perm and Brad Hooper have teamed up to form the Don't Yank the Crank Committee.
Don't yank the crank. I love that. They're that attached to these old phones?
People don't like change. So they put out a petition asking people to, quote, prayerfully consider maintaining the present telephone system. It's hoped that this system will be preserved as an historic landmark for the Bryant Pond area and the state of Maine. The petition is placed in the village store.
It takes only 7 hours for the petition to reach 90 signatures in town. For the Don't Yank the Crank Committee, they view this phone system the way San Francisco viewed its cable cars. It's something to be preserved. It's part of the town's identity.
The petition is sent to the Oxford Telephone Company, and it's sent to a federal agency with the hopes of an intervention from Washington, D.C. However, time and tide wait for no one.
The Oxford Telephone Company announces the old system is going to be phased out. And pretty soon, someone here in Woodstock turns the crank on their phone for the last time. And that brings us back to today. 1981.
1981. And the folks here in Woodstock, Maine, they went down swinging.
Well, it had to happen eventually.
Sure.
I wonder what dial-up internet would have been like over crank phones.
Can you imagine that? You've got mail. Who has mail? Me? My neighbor? I have no idea.
This 14-foot giant crank telephone monument was placed here in 2008. It was sculpted by Gil Whitman, a World War II veteran, a Maine state rep, and a barbershop quartet singer. It was placed here in Remembrance Park, which sits just across the street from the Woodstock post office. There's a plaque on the front that reads, "This sculpture by Gil Whitman is dedicated to the memory of Barbara and Eldon Hathaway, owners of the Bryant Pond Telephone Company."
So the town, once home to America's smallest telephone company, now lays claim to the world's largest telephone. Progress continues no matter what. Though the crank was ultimately yanked here in Woodstock, through this roadside oddity, the legend lives on. And that brings us to After the Legend, where we dial deeper into this week's story and sometimes get disconnected.
After the Legend is brought to you by our Patreon patrons. This group of insiders gets early ad-free access to everything first. They support us in everything we do. We couldn't bring you 2 episodes each week without them. Plus, they get bonus episodes and content that no one else gets to hear. If you want to join our legendary army, just head over to patreon.com/New England Legends to sign up.
And if you'd like to see some pictures of the world's largest telephone in Woodstock, Maine, click on the link in our episode description or go to our website and click on episode 318. 2 of our sources for this, by the way, the July 25th, 1981 Lewiston Sun newspaper and the August 10th, 1981 Bangor Daily News, talking about all the hubbub in the Don't Yank the Crank Committee, which, if that's not a T-shirt available in Woodstock, Maine, should be, and you should get on that.
What a retro shirt that would be.
Totally retro.
Sounds like a radio station, quote, or not a quote, but a slogan or something.
Yeah, don't yank the crank.
Yeah, don't yank the crank.
Don't yank the crank.
Turn the dial.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I think that there's a T-shirt opportunity there for you, Woodstock, Maine. People could come through, take pictures, Go buy the T-shirt. It should look old. It should look like a 1980s T-shirt with like the
fading and everything. Oh, the stripes on the the arms. Oh my God, those were awesome.
Like a nice like tan color that no one would ever buy today. You know,
right? Yeah.
But yeah. So you've made some crank phone calls, right?
Yeah, and it was basically just the your refrigerator running. I wasn't that creative as a kid. Or breathing deeply.
All right, I remember calling a bowling alley, and do you have 8-pound balls? How do you walk? Right. Or do you you call the grocery store and you'd say, hey, do you have olive oil in a bottle? And they'd say, sure. You'd be like, well, we better let her out. Popeye's going to get mad. This is how dumb our childhood was. One more. I remember.
You always thought you were fooling people, too. You had that little squeaky voice asking the questions.
And the grocery store is like, dude, you're the fifth today. Like the fifth kid today to make this call.
Not very original.
So sick of this. One of the other ones, which was so stupid too, is you would, and again, for younger people, I mean, people under, I don't know, 30, right? Yeah. There was no caller ID. The phone rang. You had no idea who was on the other end. You didn't know if it was, grandma or the loved one or the police or anything. You had no clue. So you answered. So you'd call a number and you'd say, hey, is Ray there, please? And they'd say, oh, no, you have the wrong number. There's no Ray here. Oh, sorry. And you'd wait a few minutes and you'd call back and you'd say, oh, can I please speak to Ray? And they'd say, no, there's no Ray here. You have the wrong number. And then you wait a few minutes and you call back a third time. And you say, hi, this is Ray. Did I get any calls?
I like that. That's actually good.
I think I've just gone through the whole repertoire. I think that's all of them now.
That's a good one, though. That's very innocent. And it's funny. You have to laugh on the other end.
Right. No one gets hurt. You're not scaring anybody. It was just a stupid crank call.
This one time, I don't know how it happened, but I was making a crank call, which I always called a prank call.
Prank, yeah, I know. Yeah.
And somehow my dad got connected. I don't know if he was calling in at the exact moment I was calling out, but I'm doing my thing, and then my dad's like, Ray, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, Dad? And he was at work. I don't know how that happened. Because, telephones in the 70s and 80s were...
Lines could cross.
They could cross easily.
Yeah.
We used to dial, so it was 867. We would dial 7 in the 4 digits.
Right.
We didn't even have to do 867.
That's right. Yeah.
And then everything changed, of course. But caller ID was huge. Star 69 was another big one.
That came around, and then people who were mad at you for your prank call could star 69 you and call you back. But I still don't think they knew who they were calling.
No, but it was still, as a kid, to hear that adult yelling at you by calling. Because then they could star 69 when mom and dad are home from work.
Right.
So you have to be very careful about that.
Sure. And you just pulled off the crime of the century, asking if their refrigerator was running. God, so stupid.
So you think kids driving by this thing get spooked? Like, what is that thing? What's that large, ominous object just in the middle of nowhere?
You know what we should put up next to it? What? A giant cassette tape.
Like an answering machine?
What is that?
Oh, that, yeah. Or a big answering machine.
That's an MP3
like Stonehenge.
Player.
Nobody has any idea what these things are or who left them here.
That was the MP3 player from 1980. That's what we had. Different times, So the crank phone, I had one on my wall in my bedroom.
My grandparents had one.
But it was fake. It had a little string, but it looked like the real thing. It had 2 bells at the top where there'd be a little thing in between them, a ding ding ding. Yep. And then it came down and there was the mouthpiece horn, and then on the side was the what you would listen with a wire, and you would hold it up, and it was like a box, like the size of like a shoebox. And it was on my wall opposite my bed. And when I was very young, I remember, we're talking like age 4 or so, I had to go to bed when it was still light out, especially in the summer, because you're a kid, you go to bed early.
Yeah.
As the sun would get lower and lower, that phone used to look like a face.
Oh, yeah.
And as it got
with the bells on the top.
The bells were the eyes, and the mouth was the thing. And as the gloaming, right, is that last bit of daylight before it just goes away. And I was petrified of that phone. Every night as the sun set, I was so scared of the face in that phone. Here's the silly thing. My parents were not mean. They were not abusive. If I went and I said, Mom, Dad, I'm totally freaked out by this phone on the wall. It scares me every night the sun goes down. They would take it out immediately.
Sure.
But I didn't want to look like a wimp. So
why did you have a crank phone on your wall?
No, they thought it was cool. You want to put it on your wall? Okay. And then until I went to bed. And then I'm like, it's really scary.
Most kids were hanging posters of like Wade Boggs and
I had
Larry
that too.
Bird.
Yeah, I know. I had that stuff too. But yeah, I had this old phone. I don't even know why.
You can see them at, you can find them at antique stores.
Sure.
I see them all the time when I'm out and about.
Yeah, those are the crank phones. That's what you did. But the eavesdropping. So my grandparents.
Creepy as that.
My grandparents had a party line. With like a couple of neighbors. And that was when I was a kid. So the party line was, you want to make a phone call. You would pick it up and you'd hear like neighbors talking to someone else. And you're like, and so I remember my grandmother, like we were calling something, right? And so we wait a few minutes, she'd pick it up again, and then wait a few minutes, picked it up again. And finally she's like, Mrs. Teetlebaum, like I need to make a call soon. Can you wrap this up?
That's
yeah. Sorry. I'm like, and it was cheaper. It was less expensive. So they did it that way. They did it to save money. But I mean, how many times, part of me is like, do you ever just pick up the phone and listen to Mrs. Teetlebaum's conversation?
Yeah.
I mean, just like,
she's doing her therapy session.
Right.
All the neighbors know her dirty laundry.
So if those early crank calls, you knew the operator. She was local. Usually a she. Yeah. Could have been men too, but mostly women. You knew them. You'd be like, "Oh, hey, Madge. Can you patch me through to Ray? I got to ask him a question." And maybe you just understood that at any time someone could be listening. Yeah. So you probably kept your conversations pretty like, hey, Ray, let's meet for fishing at 5 p.m. Yeah. You bring the worms, I'll bring the extra rods or whatever, and cool, which is all code for we're going out for beer, meet at the bar. Right.
You had to make code to talk to your friends. Yeah, so the operator really didn't know what you were doing.
Oh, yeah, Jeff and Ray are going fishing. That's cute. Like,
How many people were convicted of crimes based on what the operator heard?
Which I got to believe was probably illegal. I mean,
maybe
I don't know. Like today, if I were to bug your phone, and the government obviously can with a search warrant or something like that. They're allowed to do that. But
if you secretly record me, you can't use that in court.
I don't believe I could.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
Which is funny. I could say I killed somebody.
Right.
You've got me on tape, but you didn't tell me you were recording me.
Right.
So my confession doesn't count. Mm-hmm. That's our legal system, by the way.
Yeah, I know. But yes, you could say that's a total flaw with it. However, if that was admissible, you don't want everyone recording everyone all the time, eavesdropping for blackmail or
maybe everyone would behave if they knew they were being recorded. Actually, we are being recorded at all times.
We're definitely being recorded right now.
My phone's right next to me.
Right now.
Well, right now, literally, we are being recorded.
Right. We are recording.
But Alexa's listening to me right now.
You're going to set her off again.
I know. I did that, shouldn't I?
You did that in another episode. But yeah, so those old phones.
Alexa's a dirty word in our house. When you're just having a conversation, you want to mention her.
Right.
You don't say it loud.
Or you say the A word.
Yeah, like I had to sign up for that extra special Alexa Plus,
Right.
Because you don't want her to know that. Or
because she's listening, being like, "Ooh, Ray's in the market for a new car. Let's feed him car ads."
Actually, there's a lot of things that we have to whisper about in your house. So we're in the market for a new car.
And you voluntarily put that in your house.
Yes, I know. Your TV, though. Your TV is a smart TV. You know why it's smart? Because it's listening.
It's listening, yeah. Because you could be like, hey, put on this channel, which is super convenient until someone hacks your TV, which I believe happened to a politician. I won't say which one. It doesn't matter. But one of the prominent ones that starts fights when you mention their names claimed that her television had suddenly, like, it was like you were seeing someone through a laptop.
Oh my gosh.
And she believes her smartphone, her smart TV was hacked, which
can happen.
It's probably not even radically hard to do.
No. And do you think TVs have cameras in them? I know some do purposely.
Right.
But you think they're all being made with
Skypes
cameras?
Or Zooms or whatever? I don't imagine. I mean, I got to believe that's, you're buying one with that. Just
Maybe
like a laptop.
It's in the fine print, though, if you don't know.
Yeah.
Like the last TV I bought, I didn't assume there'd be a camera in it.
And you saw the 800-page terms of service, and you're like, agree.
Yeah, that's it.
Nobody reads it.
Yeah.
We're going to listen. We're going to watch you. We're going to, blackmail you. You agree to all this.
Oh, yeah.
Remember when it said agree to continue, and you're just like, whatever, I just need to watch the game.
Scroll. This is too long. Agree. I just want to get to my lunch.
Yeah. Now we're all playing lawyer ball.
Anyway, back to crank phone calls.
Yes, simpler
phones.
Simpler times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was fun. That was good. Now I want to go visit it. You said you did.
Yeah, I've driven.
But for real,
been right by it. It's we were on a road trip with Frank Race, the photographer, and Tony Dunn, who works on the TV show. And we were cutting through Woodstock, and just stopped dead in our tracks when we saw this giant phone. Didn't know anything about it. Just said, let's jump out, let's take some pictures, and didn't know what to do with it until right now.
Did you know that on our website you can find dates for Jeff's fall story tour, and you can see my band, the Pub Kings? Also, please do us a favor and post a podcast review for us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It's one of the many ways that you can help us. The more people who listen, the more people who share the unique and weird stories you love. And be sure to tell a friend or two about us and join our super secret New England Legends Facebook group.
We'd like to thank our sponsors. Thank you to our Patreon patrons. And our theme music is by John Judd.
Until next time, remember,
the bizarre is closer than you think.